Have you ever stopped to think about the language you're thinking in right now? For most of us, it's just there. It's natural. But what if I told you that for centuries, the simple act of a poet writing in their own everyday language was a defiant, even revolutionary act? It's this amazing story about how the language we speak became a battleground for culture, identity, and art. So let's get into it.
I know, it sounds kind of weird to us today, right? But for a very long time, choosing your native tongue over the proper language of scholarship could get you totally dismissed, written off as a lightweight. So what was really going on? Why did these writers have to fight so hard just for the right to sound like themselves?
Well, to really get this, we've got to jump back in time to the Renaissance. This was a period when the entire world of ideas, it was basically dominated by two ancient, towering authorities.
Think of it like this. On one side, you had classical Latin. This was the language of the Roman Empire, of the Church, of all serious scholarship. And on the other, you had the massive philosophical authority of Aristotle, whose rules on poetry were treated almost like scientific fact. So basically, anything that was considered important, we're talking philosophy, science, art, it was all happening inside this very exclusive club, speaking a language that was completely separate from what people actually used on the street every day.
So here's the bottom line. If you were an ambitious writer back then, you had a really stark choice. You could write in Latin and be part of the serious, high-minded conversation, or you could write in your local language, what they called the vernacular, Italian, French, English, and risk being completely ignored. The deck was absolutely stacked against you. But things were starting to change. A new generation of writers started to push back, and one of the most important figures leading the charge was this incredible Italian poet named Torquato Tasso.
Now this guy, Tasso, he was something else. He wasn't just a brilliant poet who wrote his epic masterpiece, Jerusalem Delivered, in Italian. He was also a razor-sharp thinker. He wrote this huge treatise, the Discourses on the Heroic Poem, which was basically his manifesto. It laid out the whole argument for why writing in your own language wasn't just okay, it could actually be the highest form of art.
And I mean, think about how gutsy that is. This was an incredibly bold claim. He wasn't just asking for a seat at the table. He was trying to flip the whole table over. He was arguing that the epic poem, written in the language of the people, was the absolute pinnacle of what literature could be. And to prove that, he had to go head-to-head with the big guy himself, Aristotle.
And this brings us to the main event. It was a literary title fight, a real showdown, the epic poem versus tragedy. So, in one corner, championed by Aristotle for centuries, you have tragedy. According to the classical rulebook, this was the undisputed champ, the tightest, most powerful form of storytelling there was. So, why did Aristotle think it was the best? Well, his logic was that tragedy was like a compressed epic. It had all the same good stuff, big plots, deep characters, grand themes, but it delivered it all with way more focus and unity. It was like a concentrated espresso shot of storytelling that gave you a more powerful emotional kick. To him, it was just perfect.
But Tasso wasn't buying it. He looked at that argument and was basically like, hang on a second. He believed that the huge, sprawling, magnificent nature of the epic poem offered something special, something that tragedy, with all its focus, just couldn't deliver. For Tasso, the real magic was in the sheer scope and beauty of the language itself. He argued that the epic, with its grand scale, creates this unique feeling of delight. It's that sense of wonder and awe you get from these huge, breathtaking metaphors and incredible figures of speech. It was an art of grandeur, and you just couldn't shrink it down.
And I love this quote because it shows you just how smart he was about this whole thing. He's not just disrespectfully tearing down the old master. No, he frames it as, hey, Aristotle and I, we're on the same team. We're both just trying to find the truth. He was respectfully building on Aristotle's foundation to create something new. It was such a savvy, masterful move.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit, because Tasso, as important as he was, wasn't fighting this battle alone, not by a long shot. He was riding this massive historical wave that was reshaping the whole of Europe.
I mean, all across the continent, from Italy to England, the biggest and brightest literary minds were making the exact same radical choice, to write in their own languages. This wasn't just some passing trend, this was a full-blown linguistic revolution.
And you can really see it when you lay it out on a timeline like this. This wasn't a flash in the pan. It was a slow burn, a sustained movement that built up over centuries. You've got giants like Dante and Petrarch in Italy, Chaucer in England, and then later Tasso and Spenser.
each one adding more fuel to the fire, passing the torch to the next.
So what was the engine behind all this change? Well, it was basically a perfect storm of two huge historical forces. First, you have the rise of nationalism. People are starting to think of themselves as Italian or English, with a unique culture that's worth celebrating. And second, you got the Protestant Reformation, which pushed this radical idea that everyone, not just the priests, should be able to read the Bible in their own language. And you see, both forces were screaming the exact same thing. Language belongs to the people.
And this is where it all comes together, where you see just how big the legacy of this rebellion really was. I mean, it literally helped shape the modern world we live in today.
Because you have to realize, when Tasso and others were defending writing epics in Italian or English, it was never just about poetry. They were doing something so much bigger. They were arguing for the value of their culture, their history, their people. It's really like a chain reaction. Step 1, poets and thinkers defend their local tongue. Step 2, this defense helps standardize and develop that tongue into a real, unified national language. And step 3, that shared language becomes the bedrock, the glue that holds a modern nation together. It's incredible, right? Literature literally helped create nations.
So all this leaves us with one last question to chew on. Tasso's fight was to break poetry out of the ivory tower of Latin. But what are the classical languages of our time? What important ideas in science or law or technology are still locked away in complex jargon only accessible to the experts? What's waiting for its own Tasso to come along and translate it for the rest of us?